The next item of business is a debate on motion 6169 in the name of Jim Mather on transmission charging.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I too was involved in the exercise which the Economy, Energy and Tourism Committee undertook in order to look into our energy future. And as part of that evidence, Audrey McKeever of Highlands and Islands Enterprise said that she believed that the charging regime for access to the grid was potentially discriminatory and in contravention of EU Directive 2001/77/EC on the promotion of fair transmission charging. I'd like to submit my remarks in that context and just rehearse some of the arguments that Highlands and Islands Enterprise took to adopt that position. Of course, the areas of potential impact of the transmission charging are to discriminate against renewable energy sources in peripheral regions, such as islands or areas of low population density, as speakers agree. But there is also a distortion of the cross-border trade. Discriminatory access and charging, it is hard to separate the issues because of the detail that has been enunciated by both the Labour and Conservative spokesperson so far, but the contractual access at uneconomic costs have no value. Locational charging approach in GB effectively discriminates against areas of low population density and by extension to renewable energy. Now, the capacity or energy charge, the question is, do the current charges... Yeah, briefly.
Lewis MacDonald.
I'd just be interested in some explanation of why it is that he says that the locational element which encourages the siting of power stations close to centres of population is by extension discriminatory against renewable energy. There is clearly a coincidence of where renewable energy is located, but surely the critique of the current system is based on its impact on thermal as well as renewable generation in those areas.
Mr Gibson.
Well, that's part of my speech, which I'm just about to go on to, for sure. The current costs are based on capacity, and that discriminates against low load factor plants, such as renewables, backup plant for renewables, storage plant. Pumped storage gets a double whammy in that respect. But, the locational charges which Mr MacDonald referred to there and which I'm discussing just now show it's very inflexible, because where renewables must be where the resource is, nuclear power has to be where the consentable sites are. So there's an issue regarding that which affects where they can be set up and what charges that will be made. And coal and gas have to be where the carbon transport and storage infrastructure is. So there is an aspect that we've got to recognise in the modern system, however it's configured, that the aspects of location are a factor, but do they need to be a charge? And there's an impact on consumers. Do consumers in low transmission charge areas benefit from lower wholesale electricity prices? Well, it's a complex picture, because while we think the beta system is getting better and better for consumers in the far north of Scotland, I would suggest that if there were local electricity grids, they wouldn't be part of that system, and that in the future, because we're going to turn grids round instead of being generated in a central place and stretching out into thin copper wires at the far end, then what we're going to be seeing is the opposite, and therefore there's still room for people to actually set up new forms of grid. And I would suggest that indeed the question of what lower wholesale prices and so on are, is one that's germane. Do customers of generators who pay lower transmission charges benefit from lower wholesale electricity prices? If all charges are passed on to consumers, why differentiate? And the cross-border trading issue is very interesting, not just between Scotland and England, but, take the example which Dr Keith McLean has between France, the UK and Ireland. There's a European arrangement. The generator pays once in the home state. The differences in the costs dealt with through the Inter-Transmission System Operator Compensation, the ITC mechanism. The costs of ITC are added to the domestic transmission charges. So, to take an example, if you are exporting In Great Britain, the transmission charges are locational. In France, they're a flat rate based on usage. So you can actually get electricity from anywhere in France and export it. It will be the same price. In Ireland, they have a flat rate currently based on capacity. So here's the anomalies. If you go from the UK to Ireland, the North of Scotland generator has to pay £22 per kilowatt. The South East of England generator is paid 7 kilowatts. And the supply to England, North of Scotland generator pays 22 per kilowatts. Irish generator pays £6 per kilowatt. Supplying from anywhere in France is cheaper than from anywhere in Scotland. So is the better system actually working for us? I wonder. So we come to this question of the Renewables Directive, which makes it illegal for electricity transmission costs in member states to discriminate against electricity from renewable energy sources, including in particular where it's produced in peripheral regions such as the north of Scotland. Well, logically, you would suggest that the EU law was something which would be unanswerable. But Britain might argue that the charging regime is cost reflective. And what people are suggesting in this debate is that somehow or other we're benefiting in the north of Scotland more than we are actually paying in. But in fact, the discrimination is that in a European context, and I challenge those who might form the next government in London, are you going to work with that or are you going to work against it? Because I think in Scotland's case, if we work with the European directive, it's going to give Scottish producers and Scottish consumers a far better deal. And if we do accept that, I'll be interested to hear what the summing up from the amendments of the Labour and Tory parties are, assuming that Mr Clegg isn't going to be Prime Minister. But, you know, in the Highlands and Islands, we've got to have confidence. In the rest of Scotland, we've got to have confidence. And we've got to make sure that we build it on the basis of a sensible and logical approach. And if we can avoid the possible obstacles, then the opportunity is there for Scotland to be part of that European grid we talked of. And I have to say, it's about high time that we had some answers in that context, because to talk about it purely in terms of a British grid is to miss the big picture.